So today we will continue on the class 8, which is the operations. So this is under the PDCA, is in the all under phase do, plan, do, check and act. So under the class 8 operation, they have two subclass, which is the operational planning and control, and also the emergency preparedness and response. So let's go on this first subclass, 8.1, operational planning and control. What is stated under requirement here? The organization shall establish, implement, control, and also maintain of what? On the processes needed to meet the environmental management system requirement, and implement the action which is already identified in clause 6.1 and 6.2 by establishing operating criteria of the processes. You must have the criteria of the processes that you already established, and also implementing control of the processes in accordance with the operating criteria. So here they have two keywords here. First, you must have the operating criteria for the processes. Second, you need to control of the processes according to the operating criteria that you already established. And also, the organization shall control, plan changes, and review the consequence of unintended changes, taking action to mitigate an adverse effect as necessary. And also, the organization shall ensure that outsourced processes are controlled or influenced. The type and extent of the control or influence to be applied to the processor shall be defined within the environmental management system. Okay, so from here, what is the requirements? You must establish, implement, control, maintain the processes needed to meet the environmental management system that already identified in 6.1, 6.2. What is a clause 6? If you can recall back, what is this clause 6?
Planning.
Planning. Okay. So what is this 6.1? Under clause planning.
To address risks and opportunities.
Action to address what?
Risk and
Opportunity.
Risk and opportunity. 6.2.
Environmental objective and planning to achieve them.
All right. Okay. So to do the 6.1, 6.2. Okay, that's why this is the do. To do the or to achieve planning that you have 6.1, 6.2. Therefore, you must have a process how to achieve 6.1, 6.2. And to do that, you must have the operating criteria of these processes. Operating criteria. So later we will show you what is operating criteria. And secondly, you must have a control of this operating criteria. Beside that, under this do action, you must also control any changes, either these changes been planned or unintended changes, because any changes will have the consequence. Okay, either is we give a benefit effect, or we will be adverse effect. And also, not all the processes are within your control. Sometimes you outsource these processes. Therefore, you must ensure that you can control or have influence, especially if these processes are applied within the defined of environmental management system. Okay, and the last part, you must also consider this operational planning and control with a life cycles perspective. So you must think, right, from the cradle to the grave, because you must consider all the process starting from the planning, design, development, and also implementation about the life cycle stage, and or during the procurement of product or services, when you plan to purchase. And also, if you have the external provider, including contractor, you must determine the environmental requirements. And also consider the need to provide information about the potential significant environmental impacts associated with the transportations of the delivery, use, end of life treatment, and also the final disposal of each product and services. And lastly, all this should be maintained documented information to extent necessary to have confidence that the process has been carried out as a plan. Okay. Right. So this is a chart, or what they call opposites pyramids, least preferable to the most preferable. It should show you avoid, reduce, reuse, recycle, recover, treat, and dispose. This is the idea if you want to consume any natural resources. The most preferable, avoid, means don't use at all. That's the most preferable, most effective to protect, minimize any effect to the environment. The least preferable is dispose. When you still need to use these natural resources, but after you use, how you dispose these resources. And that's why you need to think the life cycle perspective. You need to consider the life cycle elements on the stages when you want to implement under clause 8. So let me show you an example. Okay, this is the processor that you can identify. In this example is for the timber milling and sawing line in the timber industry. Okay, so first you know the input, which is the raw timber, and to do this process you required energy. And for the output is the finishing timber, which is already well cut. Okay, which already cut to the what I call the specifications based on the spec given by the customer. Okay, then we have the significant aspect. First, utilization of the timber, which is the timber sourcing, consumption of energy. Okay, and then you have the temperature control storage, is dealing with the energy consumption. The machine coolant use and dispose, this is chemical. Chemical use and disposal for wood treatments, also dealing with the chemical. The offcut and the sawdust collection and storage, this is the finished product. Beside the timber, you also produce the sawdust. How to control? This is the how you can control by three perspectives. Either you can control on the management by having the purchasing policy, custody chain of certificate, procedure and policy. Or on the perspective of operational, the process flow chart, work instruction, signage, training, inspections or monitoring. The third perspective, you can control by automations, mean using robot, okay, or smart, using the Internet of Things, IoT, okay, or designated storage area, mean control area, the spill kits to handle the spillage, okay, metering to have the monitor, and the drain coding. So this is an example that you can control. Okay, the criteria, you can see here they say that operating criteria. So operating criteria normally is something that are measurable. Measurable. For example, like input, the raw timber, okay? Then you can measure or have the criteria by having the weight of the timber that you are purchasing. So that's the operating criteria. Okay. For example, like energy consumptions based on the megawatt. This is the operating criteria. Okay. So what's the criteria? Mean you put the what they call the limitation. For example, per month, how many megawatt electricity you want to use? Okay, that you want to control. How many consumption of petrol in liter that you want to consume to generate energy, for example. This is the operating criteria that you can control. Okay, another example. This is for the design office. Okay. So for example, like the company that doing the multimedia, okay, industry, that they produce poster, banner, okay, or produce website. Okay, so what's the input? So the paper, ink, IT equipment, energy, based on the customer's specification. And then what's the output? The design, drawing, and also the support material. For example, like banner, when you design a banner, you not only provide a banner to the customer, but you also provide the what they call the material to hang the banner. Okay, to put the banner, this is the support material. Okay, so what's the significant one aspect? Okay, by considering the life cycle perspective from the beginning, procurements, mean you want to purchase. Is it you purchase normal ink or environmental friendly ink? Is it you want to purchase paper or recycle paper? Okay, or the IT equipments. Is it you purchase the equipments that have a 5-star energy consumption or 3-star what they call energy consumption labeling? Then you use the energy, for example. So how you want to control? First, you can go to on the management perspective by having the policy, or you can go to the operation perspective by the flow chart, or on the equipment's perspective, the default setting on the printer, for example. So this is how the operational control measure can be take place in the workplace, or inside the industry. All right. So before we go to the class 8.2, do you have any question for 8.1? which is the operational planning and control. The operational planning and control.
So far tak ada sir soalan.
Any questions? All right, thank you for the feedback. Now we go to 8.2. Okay, 8.2 emergency preparedness and response. So you can see here is about emergency situations that you need to prepare, and if happens, you need to respond. So what's the requirement under 8.2? The organization shall establish, implement, and also maintain of what? On the processes need to prepare for and also respond to the potential emergency situation that already identified in the 6.1.1, which is related with the planning. Under 6.1 is about the risk and opportunity. The organization shall prepare to respond by planning action to prevent or mitigate adverse environmental impact from emergency situation. So here you must plan, okay, how to take prevention or mitigations any adverse environmental impact that can happen due to the emergency situations. Second, if the actual emergency happen, you need to respond. And during the emergency, you must take action to prevent or mitigate any consequence of emergency situation. And this action must be appropriate to the magnitude of the emergency and also to the magnitude of the potential environmental impact. And for example, like leakage or spillage of chemical, hazardous chemical. So what action you should taken? First, of course, the B, respond to the actual emergency situation. You need to stop the leakage or stop the spillage. That's the first thing need. And of course, after you stop the spillage or leakage, so this spillage or leakage already contaminate the land or the soil. Okay, so this chemical or liquid have potential to seep through the soil and go to the groundwater. Therefore, you need to treat this soil or stop the leakage from penetrate the soil. So you need to take the C action, take action to prevent. D, periodically test a plan response action where practicable. So actually this is referring to the A that you already prepare how to respond any emergency situation. D is to test this response action. For example, like what you normally gone through during the school, for example, like fire drill. Fire drill is to test how the student or the occupant inside the building respond to the signal of emergency with the alarm sign, for example. How quick that you are empty, you escape from the building, for example. This is to test how the response action taken during the emergency. And the last is periodically review and revise the process and plan response action, in particular after occurrence of emergency situation or the test. So here you can see after either the actual emergency situation occurred or after you already testing, then you try to evaluate whether your process is effective or not. And the last part, you need to provide this relevant information, either the actual emergency happen or the training information that related to the emergency preparedness and response as appropriate to the relevant interested party, including a person working under its control. Okay, why he state here to relevant interested party, for example, like fire drill. To do fire drill, normally you also test to give a call to the fire departments, and the fire department will respond, and they also will see how long it takes you to arrive at your places or your premise. So normally this is very important, especially if your industry have very sensitive element that can cause harm to the communities, your surrounding, for example, like radioactive or hazardous chemical and so on. Okay, so this is the A, B, C, D, E, and F. Okay, that is you need to do. The organization sure mean you must have on activity that you to prepare and respond for the emergency. So what we can summarize here, first, the organization need to identify what the potential emergency situation that can occur in your places based on your active product and services. And for example, like natural disaster. And for example, like flood, for example. Okay, or highly potential of fire, or leakage or spillage. Okay, so you need to identify this emergency situation. And next, how to respond this emergency situation if it really happened, and how to take action to prevent or mitigate the consequence from this emergency situation. And then you need to test this thing that you plan to respond. And then you need to periodically revise. I mean, normally people will test it yearly. Okay, and then from that testing, then you can study the efficiency, and then you can do the review and revise, and the process, and also the procedure that involved inside the process of the emergency situations. And of course, the last is to provide information and training to the interested party and also the person working under behalf. All right. So all this process must be maintain documented information to the extent necessary to have confidence that the process is carried out as a plan. So this is evident to show that you already fulfill this requirement. 8.2 emergency preparedness and response. Okay. All right. So this is thing normally happen in the workplace. So you identify the critical asset, okay, normally which cause you what are the major what I call equipments or product, okay, or item inside your workplace. Okay, then you identify the individual or group who take actions during the emergency. So normally they have the what I call rescues team. Then the outsourced emergency services, the how to contact, especially fire departments, the hospital nearby, okay, or the enforcement agency like police, and who should be communicate. Okay, mean the person in charge if the emergency occurred or happened. Okay, who is the safety officer? Who's the CEO? or manager in charge, for example. And then you need to test this procedure, right? And of course, some required the media response team. You need to have a detail of who's supposed to take responsibility to contact any media if involved any accident. And for example, like what we have the latest situation, the accident by this two line of MRT. Okay, so they have a what they call media conference, for example, to tell the public, okay, what cause of these accidents, what action taken, okay, and so on and so on. That's why they need to have a media response team. Okay, so this show the previous in the applied sciences. Okay, we will conduct several emergency response. Okay, actually normally the student of environment take a lead. Okay, so you can see here this guy okay, working as a what they call the emergency team. We have two scenarios. We have done several years. We have done one is a scenario of fire. The second time we use we test a scenario of radioactive leakage, the leakage of radioactive material. So we call a special unit, the hazmat. Hazmat is a special unit in fire department that dealing with chemical hazardous, also any radioactive material. Okay. All right. So this is the flow. Flow means the process. Okay. Involved in applied sciences. Okay. This diagram show you the preparedness by the Canon Marketing Sdn Bhd. Okay. So they have a flammable. What they call how to control a flammable material. Okay, there's the blue color is actually the first aid. Okay, so this is how they prepare to respond for any emergency. All right, so here to show you how the emergency can give impact to the environment. In this diagram show you the fire. Okay, the fire actually is the initial impact. When you have a fire, they will destroy your asset, your building, your equipment, your document, and so on. So this is the initial impact, and then they have consequence, which is the secondary impact, which is the air pollution. Okay. So this burning will emit air pollutant to the environment. So that is the consequence. So first, you need to respond to this emergency by putting down the fire. Putting down the fire. Okay, and then you need to do the next step to control this secondary impact, which is the consequence from the emergency. Of course, in this case, it's quite difficult to control the emissions. The only thing you can control from the emission from the fire is to putting down the fire. Okay, you need to put off the fire first. So once you manage to control the fire, there's no more emission released to the atmosphere. And this is the scenario on the fire. Of course, different scenario have different consequence. For example, that the leakage or spillage of chemical to the soil, to the drainage. This is the different action need to be taken. So that's it for 8.2. Do you have any question for 8.2, which is emergency preparedness and response?
No, sir.
All right. So we finish under class 8, which is a two subclass. 8.1 operational planning and control. 8.2 emergency preparedness and response. Okay. I hope you can understand why this is important, and because we want to minimize any impact to the environment, and that's why inside the example I give you here, and they highlighted about the significant environmental aspect. Any activity that can interact with the environment, therefore you need to identify the 3 criteria of these processes operating, and you must also control. So these 2 keywords important in control the operational control measure. Second, during the operations, and they might have a situation what you call emergency. Therefore, you need to prepare and you need to respond if this emergency situation occurred during the operation. So that is the summary of the class 8. Now we go to the class 9.